everybody, I'm Mario and it's time for a reality break. This week has been pretty exciting as far as movies have been concerned. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know Captain America Civil War was out this weekend and it was awesome, I have to say. I'm not going to do any review on it. I'll wait 2 weeks. I like to give 2 weeks before I'll do any kind of in-depth review on a movie that just came out, mainly just for courtesy so we don't spoil anything for anybody. But this one was definitely very, very, very good. Go see it. It was a lot of fun. It was very exciting, and Marvel has done, once again, a great job and just knocked it out of the park. Also, Deadpool came out on Blu-ray on Tuesday, and it was just as fun as it was in the theater. So I can't wait. I haven't yet gotten a chance to explore the Blu-ray a whole bunch, so I can't wait to see what like the deleted scenes and all that stuff that are on the Blu-ray. See how much fun those are going to be also. Honest Trailers did their Deadpool Honest Trailer with Deadpool Crash the Party too. And wow, it's just fantastic. So check them out. I'll put a link to that one in the show notes because that was a lot of fun. I know most of these reality breaks I have been talking about movies, talking about video games, but I wanted to talk about something else today that's definitely near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite hobbies, and that is tabletop role-playing games. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here, move away from the screens and back to the table with a group of friends and really tell stories and have a lot of fun playing some games, rolling some dice, stuff like that. And while there is a lot of different role-playing games out there, there are there are definitely hundreds of different role-playing games out there. The ones I really want to talk about right now are fantasy role-playing games. Mainly the old granddaddy of them all, Dungeons and Dragons, which originally came out in 1974. This is the 1979 edition. This is the 1980 edition of Dungeons and Dragons. It was created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, based on a classic tabletop war game. Those guys were big war gamers, and they wanted to do something a little bit different with the games. And so what they did is they created rules. Instead of each unit on the table being an army or being a unit, a group of soldiers, they wanted to focus on one hero, on individual heroes. And so that's where Dungeons and Dragons and the rules for Dungeons and Dragons came about. So it's gone through many iterations over the years. Again, the original one was published in 1974. So that was actually 2 years before I was born. So it's been around a really long time. And so it was published as Dungeons and Dragons right up until, actually in 1977, TSR, the company that they created, brought out a new version called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. They were still publishing the original Dungeons and Dragons, but in 1977 they started with this Advanced Dungeons and Dragons to expand the rules and allow people to do a little bit more with the characters and with the rules that they had in the game. Unfortunately, during the 1980s, there was also the big Dungeons and Dragons Satanism scare. So bringing a little history on the game through this timeline I'll be talking about here. And during the 80s, there was a big Dungeons and Dragons scare. There were talks of Satan worship and other cult following things that the media just blew out of proportion. Honestly, if you go back and watch some of these old videos of videos, there was a 60-minute special that they did on Dungeons and Dragons and how it's harmful to the youth. You can just go right into that and replace it with video games, replace it with heavy metal music, replace it with whatever else was the poison du jour of affecting the minds of young people. Really, it's just a classic. The media needs something to report on, and at that time, Dungeons and Dragons was new. It was a little strange. It was a lot of there were the kids that were a bit loners or a bit withdrawn kids found it real easy to come out and play these other characters, where all of a sudden, instead of being the nerd in second period science class, you could all of a sudden be Lothar, of the Hill People. You could be your barbarian swordsman, with his two-handed great axe slaying dragons and rescuing damsels and getting treasures and all that good stuff. Near the end of the 1980s, Dungeons and Dragons came out with a second edition. Unfortunately, I don't have the source book for that one. A lot of the old Dungeons and Dragons players and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons players had a problem with it because in the earlier versions, Dungeons and Dragons was very unforgiving. You rolled, you got poorly, and you die. Your character died. That happened all the time. And it was kind of part of the fun of the game, actually. Not the dying part, but the seeing how far your character can get. But I'm one of the players that I don't really like the super high level campaigns where you're basically fighting gods and other such creatures that are going to be way super powerful and stuff. I like the level 1 through 10. I like those challenging early levels where the characters are just coming into their powers. I like the origin story. Who knows? Again, when second edition came out, they tried to make it a bit more family friendly. They tried to make it a bit more accessible, a bit more hero like. So your characters were definitely more superhero type adventurers. There wasn't a lot of this. Oh well, you're a fighter and you're not very strong, but you're a fighter, So good luck with that. It was definitely more focused and started to become more min-max with the characters where your stats would be more maximized to a certain character class and to a certain play style. But they came out with a lot of modules and a lot of extra source books and stuff with that edition, and it was a lot of fun. It was there was a lot of different new and interesting ideas. There were different new settings that came out. There was Forgotten Realms, Al-Qadim, Oriental Adventures, Dark Sun, Greyhawk, Dragonlance. Ravenloft was also another one. All these different and very classic settings for Dungeons and Dragons came out during this time, during the 90s to the 2000. In 2000, Dungeons and Dragons decided they were going to come out with a new edition, and it was 3rd edition. The one I have here is actually version 3.5, which was, they changed it around a little bit, and they went to the D20 system, which changed some of the rules and made some of the math quite a bit easier. Now with this 3rd edition, I believe the only new setting that came out with 3rd edition was Eberron, which is kind of like I'd say magic punk is probably the best description of this one. And so they were doing a lot of noir stuff. There was the cities and lightning rails and stuff like that. That was a lot of fun to play around with. I love that setting, even though I really never got to play in it very often. So from 3rd edition, in 2003, they came out with 3.5, which was this one here, 3.5. So they came out with expanding the rules a bit and really refining the rule set and stuff. And at that same time, though, there was also a lot of additions with this D20 system and the open gaming license. A lot of companies were able to do not expansions, but different, expansion books and expansion source books for different character classes, different races, different weapon styles, fighting, magics, all this stuff. And so there was a lot of stuff that came out. And then came 2008, which was the big rift, the sundering of the role-playing landscape. And even before that, though, there were other systems out, but D&D was really the big kid on the block. Honestly, unless if you were playing fantasy role-playing, you were most likely playing Dungeons and Dragons. And so when in 2008, D&D came out with the much reviled 4th edition. In this version, I think they did a massive overhaul of the system. And this is where the big rift came from. At this point, they did a massive overhaul of the system and definitely made it a lot more tactical. The gaming system was more tactical. They got rid of a lot of the feats and a lot of the skills and stuff like that 3.5 was really known for. 3.5 really got very granular with the skills, whereas 4th edition turned it a lot more into almost into a board game. A lot of people compared it to Blizzard's World of Warcraft, which was very popular at the time. And so this version, all the different character classes had different power. It had daily powers and encounter powers and stuff like that, which made it a lot more like made it a lot more like a video game, which was where you have a power, you use that power, and then you wait for that power to reset, which is, again, that's a lot like World of Warcraft. And a lot of people made that comparison. And again, a lot of gamers didn't like it. A lot of people refused. No way we're buying 4th edition. Personally, I didn't really mind it that much, but I usually play a magic user anyway, so I'm used to managing powers. So it took a little bit of messing around with, but I personally I thought it was all right. Though I think I'm the only person that I know that did. A lot of people really didn't like it, and so they went over to the other big daddy on the scene, Pathfinder, which was published by Paizo Publishing, and this company actually used to publish Dungeon and Dragon magazines, respectively, which were a monthly periodical that Wizards of the Coast licensed from them, and in it there were articles on different play styles and different and there were expansions, character classes, adventures, a lot of really good content. And unfortunately, just at that time, just before 4th edition came out, Wizards of the Coast stopped publishing those. They took away that license, was no longer with Paizo, and so Paizo took the open gaming license and turned it into their own game. And honestly, it's a really good game. It is extremely rules heavy though, which is the part that I unfortunately don't like. But if you can think of something to put in this game, there is a splat book for it. There are hundreds, and I'll probably say even thousands of books that are compatible with the Pathfinder role-playing system. Different character classes, different weapon systems, different books of just NPCs, and they would put out regularly scheduled adventure paths. And they also had a organized play system in place to where you could go to a scheduled, organized Pathfinder game night and play your character, and then give the information into Paizo, and they would, and your character would be updated, and basically this character would be available across different locations. So say you had a character you were playing here, and then you were going to a league play or a Pathfinder league play in Gen Con, and you could take your character, he'd be completely legal, and it would be, you could just pick right up where your character left off. Your character can go on all kinds of adventures, which I think that was actually really pretty awesome. I personally haven't been able to play in a sit like that, but I think it would be great. I think it'd be a lot of fun to do that sort of thing with an ongoing character that you literally could play over several years. But like I said, my biggest problem with Pathfinder though is that it is so rules intensive. Like I said, literally there is a rule for pretty much everything, and that can get a little cumbersome. Myself as a GM, it's hard to make a game when you can make builds of characters in Pathfinder, when you could create a character that is built specifically to do this one perfect thing. And so in that one area, that character is completely overpowered and really difficult to make games for or make encounters for, to where that character won't overshadow the other players, which can be frustrating for the game master and the players at the same time. So the Pathfinder though, like I said, it is a fun system. It is very nice that you can get pretty much the whole game is in this core rule book. You only have to buy one book, and you can play the whole game right out of this book, and it's a lot of fun. Like I said, if you're someone who does like to have a lot of rules, have a lot of granularity with your character, it's a great system to use for that, because you can set out exactly what skills, what feats, what into the minutia of your character, which some people like that, and it can be a lot of fun playing the game that way. So again, after the Great Rift of 2009, which is when Pathfinder came out, Dungeons and Dragons kind of went back to their roots a little bit. I think they sourced out to the community a lot of what they're called D&D Next at that point, and started doing a lot of play testing, getting a lot of feedback from the community. And so finally in 2014, the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition came out. So it was called D&D Next during all the play testing. And again, this is the 5th edition. And honestly, I have to say this, personally, I think this is the best version of Dungeons & Dragons so far. They did, Wizards of the Coast did a lot of play testing. They took a lot of feedback from players and dungeon masters and everyone who wanted to give feedback, and they took all that and they really absorbed it properly and put it into the game. So in this version, it actually goes a bit more rules light than Pathfinder or 3.5 did. They went back to not having the power systems that 4th edition did. They kind of, 4th edition, they just kind of shoved it off to the side and said, well, oops, sorry about that. We're going to go back to a more classic D20 system. The character classes are a lot more classic, as it were. So the different character classes stuff. And they also came out with a few, with some great campaign settings too. They start off with Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat, which was a nice campaign setting that was just right out of the box, which was something that I think was definitely lacking in 3.5 and 4th edition. They tended to come out with a lot of source books and a lot of, Player's Handbook 2 and 3 and Monster Manual 2, 3, 4, 5. But they weren't coming out with very many adventures. Back in 2nd edition, that was one of my favorite things to do, was to go to the bookstore and look at all the different modules that they had for playing Dungeons and Dragons. So you could pick up an adventure and just go home, read through it, and run it, that weekend. And it was great. And you didn't have to do a whole lot of prep work on your own, which is, fun, but sometimes you're just, you don't have the mental energy to put together a whole adventure that's going to run over a couple of sections and stuff like that. And again, in 5th edition, so they started coming out with those. There's still not as many, but there's a lot of really good stuff that they've come out with for 5th edition. Tour of the Dragon Queen. Then the Princes of the Apocalypse was the next adventure set. The next campaign set that came out, followed by, Princes of the Apocalypse, Elemental Evil, and just most recently, they brought back Ravenloft, which is with the Curse of Strahd. And I haven't picked that one up yet, but that one is just, I love Strahd, I love Ravenloft. It's a great setting. That setting is, it's more of a gothic horror type setting, classic, vampires, werewolves, all that stuff. But it's a very challenging setting, and it's definitely a lot of fun to play in. That's pretty much the history of Dungeons and Dragons. That's, all the way from 1974 to 2014, when it turned 40. And, the most recent edition is out now. I think Wizards of the Coast is doing a really good job. Like I said, 5th edition is probably my favorite version to play so far. They've added a couple of mechanics, the advantage, disadvantage mechanic, which puts more dice on the table, which is always more fun. You always want to roll more dice. And the scaling back on the rules, I think, is also a lot more fun. It allows for more cooperative storytelling rather than rules lawyering and optimize and min-max building characters and stuff like that. One more game that I did want to mention, because it's also kind of one of my favorites, and it actually goes way back to the old Dungeons and Dragons, the old 1974 editions of Dungeons and Dragons, is Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game. This one was actually put out by Goodman Game. They actually put out adventure modules for Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, 4th edition, 5th edition. They still do put out adventure modules for Dungeons and Dragons, but they were when 3.5 and 4th edition and even 5th edition came out, there was a lot of I guess more story heavy. I know it's kind of bad, but more story heavy adventures and stuff, to where you had intrigue and mystery and stuff like that. And their company was, remember when dungeons used to be underground and you would just go in and kill all those things and take their treasure? That's what Dungeon Crawl Classics does. And they had these great dungeons that were they were underground, they were dangerous, they were they were challenging, and they're a lot of fun. So finally, when Dungeon Crawl Classics came out in, when did this come out? I love the artwork in this book, by the way. It's fantastic. Sorry, I'm kind of gushing because this is one of my favorite ones. 2012. It came out in Gen Con 2012. When they brought out this one, it goes back to that old deadly dungeon crawly feel that old Dungeons and Dragons had. Yeah, on this one, your characters start off as basically 0-level NPCs where, a mosquito bite could kill this character. But it's a lot of fun. The rules are very simple. It's very rules light. There's each character class has one page, and there's not really much else. And in these ones, these are more where Dungeons and Dragons is more of a the Dungeons and Dragons, like 5th edition and the current everything past 2nd edition turned Dungeons and Dragons became a very high fantasy game, which means that magic is commonplace. You can go into a town and find a magic shop and buy magic items, normally, which is okay. I mean, that's fine if that's the kind of game you run. But the Dungeon Crawl Classics really went back. It really goes for more of a sword and sorcery type of adventure type of game, where in sword and sorcery, magic is very, very mysterious and strange. And if you couldn't tell already, I'm a big sucker for magic systems. I love magic. I always play magic users whenever I do get to play because, I could pick up a sword and hit somebody with it, but I still have yet to figure out how to throw a fireball or a lightning bolt at somebody. I like to break, I like to, leave reality behind for a little while and really have some fun with the magic. So I'm a big fan of magic systems. Dungeons and Dragons is more of the old AD&D D&D style of play where it's not focused on magic uses. The actual focus is more on your fighters and rogues, the guys who are going to sneak into the tower and steal and steal the jewels from from somebody or from the king or even from the wizard if they're really really crazy. And yet the wizard could have some crazy powers which are unpredictable and again very strange and wild. So again, that's pretty much it. That's all I'm going to talk about today as far as role-playing games. Again, I wanted to focus on fantasy today. I know there are a lot of games out there. There's sci-fi games. There is Shadowrun, Cyberpunk, although the old White Wolf games, which I think are, I don't know who owns White Wolf now, but the White Wolf World of Darkness games, the werewolf and vampire and mage and changeling, all those games, which are a lot of fun. The modern urban games. There's Fate, which is supposed to be a really awesome system. Again, I get to play it. Maybe I'll do a video on that one when I do get to play it. There's Fantasy Flight, has Star Wars games. There's games for everyone's taste. And so it's really, and honestly, personally, I really love role-playing games because you get around the table. There are ways to play online and stuff, which is fun. And, if that's what you can do, if that's what you do, great, go for it. There's, there's Roll20 and the virtual tabletop systems now that are coming out. And those are awesome too. But personally, I like getting around a table or sitting around a living room with a bunch of friends and telling the story together. And rolling some dice, telling the story, and seeing where the dice fall. That's really why I love tabletop role-playing games. I love tabletop. I love tabletop games just because of that reason. Because it's a lot of fun, just getting together with a bunch of friends. A couple of things. There's a couple of other YouTube channels that Geek and Sundry does. There's a show called Critical Role with Matt Mercer as the Dungeon Master. He's kind of my hero. And a bunch of other voice actors who play Dungeons & Dragons. They're currently playing 5th edition right now. It's a great show. Their episodes are a little bit long. They're about 3-hour long episodes. But they're a lot of fun to watch or even just listen to if you can. Also, there's Tabletop with Will Wheaton on Geek and Sundry too. That is where he's playing a lot of tabletop board games and stuff like that. And both of those are really great shows to check out if you are curious about some role-playing games, curious about role-playing. Go to your local game store. There's usually people there who want to play. And gamers are some of the most welcoming people there are. As long as you come with an open mind and are looking for some fun, you can really have a lot of fun with role-play, with any kind of games, really. That'll be it for this episode. I'll probably talk more about games later on. Again, I don't even know what episode this is. This might be like episode 5-ish or 6. I don't know. But I put up a few videos and I'm going to keep them coming. We'll talk more about, like I said, I'll probably bring out some more other role-playing games later on, maybe some of the sci-fi ones or some of the other systems, and probably talk about some tabletop games as well. Because again, those are near and dear to my heart. I really love them. Almost, just as much as movies and video games and stuff. So Anyways, thanks very much for watching. Check out the links in the show notes, and have a good weekend. Bye.